Thank you very much, Dorr, for your kind words. I'm very, very glad also to welcome you here in this 32nd meeting of the CIDOC CRM Special Interest Group. It's a great pleasure for me to be here in these facilities. In the past, we had a series of meetings in Oxford, so we are familiar to this place and had a lot of inspirations also from people from Oxford here. So I would like to give you a quick introduction to what is CIDOC CRM, and then present you an overview of the latest stage of our work, and then give the floor to other speakers to present more details. So what is CIDOC? Recently, many people think that CIDOC is the title of the model that we produce, but CIDOC is the International Committee for Documentation of ICOM, the International Council of Museums, which is a UNESCO-affiliated institution. And CIDOC CRM is the conceptual reference model that has been developed by CIDOC. CIDOC had engaged in the late 80s until 1995 in the development of a conceptual reference model based on a relational paradigm, and by 1995 it became too complex, too unwieldy, and then we started working on this new knowledge representation based approach. Also in the prospect that object-oriented methodology became industrially relevant and acceptable, and knowledge representation models and object-oriented models have the key concepts of generalization, specialization in common, which was the key to simplify how to represent the virtually unlimited complexity of things to describe in the cultural world. So CIDOC CRM Special Interest Group is a working group of CIDOC, and it was founded in August 2000 after the working group that worked on conceptual models before came to the conclusion that on one side the CIDOC CRM became so stable that it deserves work in its own, and that there are other activities in CIDOC that should be distinct from this activity. So we did something new to CIDOC. We founded a working group which was open also to non-ICOM members, because we thought that it must be very important to embrace all stakeholders in the world to be able to participate. Of course, membership in CIDOC is encouraged for anybody interested in the CRM. So the mission was to develop the CIDOC CRM as an ISO standard in the first place, and now that this has become reality from 2006 on, we have now the second release, luckily, of the CRM now in 2014, to maintain the standard and further promote its application and extension. The focus is information integration of cultural historical data across institutions, and this is also a limitation we impose on ourselves, not to model everything that is interest to be able to access information across institutions is a criteria of relevance. Further, we act as a forum for the dissemination and development of good practice, of documentation for publication and global integration of cultural historical data by analyzing the underlying concepts in the dominant in the documentation and the cultural historical discourse. We also are able to express recommendations to get a deeper understanding of what the functionality in the research argumentation is, so we can give advice to better good practice of documentation. And finally, of course, all this intellectual work does not help if there's no technology available that would allow us to work with that. Indeed, we were proactive when we started this work in 1996 with the first contacts in 1994. And only since about 2-3 years we have really the industrial systems available that can deal with these models effectively. Before, it has been more an intellectual exercise. But we are very happy that we started early enough with this work. So now that the technology is available, we have already a history, a background of consolidation, conceptual consolidation in this area. So the special interest group itself, the membership is by vote, but also non-members are invited to the mailing list. So anybody who is interested in participating in the mailing list is welcome to tell us to subscribe him. The special interest group itself has no authority in its own. Its authority comes from CIDOC. So all our results are presented summarily to CIDOC, the CIDOC board and the General Assembly of CIDOC. And that gives us the authority. And in turn, CIDOC represents the community, the museum and cultural heritage community, to ISO as the community that is interested in this standard. And ISO requires an active community to support the standard and the continued interest in its revision. All our meetings are public, discussions, minutes are published, decisions are taken by majority vote of members. Normally we would want to have consensus, not just a majority. We want to be convinced ourselves that we take the right decisions. As criteria of stability, only topics that have been published before the meeting can be decided within the meeting. So we must make sure that there's enough time to digest and to consolidate something before we take an authoritative decision that we can promote. And decisions will not be undone in the same meeting. If we made a decision, then we require that until the next meeting, new evidence has to be brought forward to revise a decision. So that had been very helpful to give our work significant stability. So we are not interested in giving rush solutions, but to make sure that we will not come in a situation to revise, to take back decisions in the future, and to stay backwards compatible with the formats we have proposed in the past. Anybody can submit an issue by email, and all issues must be discussed in a meeting. And if there's a problem of participating in meetings, any member can ask for email vote by email. The chairs themselves have no authoritative role. They have to regulate the process. So these are our business rules. I'm the current chair. Co-chairs are Christian Emil Ure and Dominic Oldman. And let's see how future of this group will evolve. So the CRM itself is based on a, let's say, an epistemological idea that the phases of the scholarly scientific process, at least in what we may call descriptive and empirical sciences, is based on a process of collecting and organizing evidence, digging up millions or billions of sherds and the dust in the archaeological excavations. Now millions of images with terabytes of data. So these are the primary sources, observations, but also the literature, the original literature, if it's authentic, is a primary source. And when we have done that, or during doing that, we want to connect these things, that they are about the same place, we have traces from the same building, from the same activity, etc. Only through the connection we can make more sense out of it. After we have the connection, the cross connections, this is the biggest problem currently we have in our information systems, then only we can start interpreting the facts, contextualizing hypothesis, building, and we can do that only reliably if we have access to all known facts. And we're still in a phase we have no access to all known facts. So this is the first thing we want to overcome, and the major focus of our work. The connection of all these facts. We can register them, but how to connect is still the problem. So billions of facts, artifacts, documents possibly shed a light on the past in unexpected contexts. It's very difficult a priori to say what the things are useful. And this happens across all disciplines. And archaeology is probably the most complex science we have, because it combines all other sciences as auxiliary, or whatever that may mean. So the CIDOC CRM is made for, in the first place, for integrating and connecting evidential data and derived facts. The CRM is not about the grand hypothesis, how cultures evolve, etc. This is on another level. This is deep in the interpretation, which is still not our problem, because we have not first solved the first problem, how to connect the facts. So let's still focus on that mainly. So it contains the most basic relationships to describe what has happened in the past at a human scale. It means people and things meeting in space-time, about relationship between parts and wholes, about relationships of using things, influence, and reference. From the first time we started to develop the CRM based on analyzing collection descriptions in museums about museum objects, and extracting the more generic concepts that are dominant and relevant, we have been asking ourselves, now what have we created here? What is this about? So my best answer currently, but you may give better answers in the future, is that it's this addressing the possible pasts at the human scale in terms of discrete objects, not in terms of weather forecasts or so, or mathematical models. So if we want to have more detailed kinds of discourse, and we will show you in a while such examples, then you need an extension. Of course, there is no model to describe this world completely. So the idea is that the CIDOC CRM standardizes only stable concepts for information sharing if we know that some concept may be a good idea, but we are not sure about its representation and about its property, how it behaves in our discourse, it's better not to standardize it, not to put it in the model, and let people add it personally, privately, locally in their system, than to make an authoritative decision, which is then an obstacle to further evolution. Yeah? So if you say, well, I use the CRM, but there's this missing this concept, I cannot use the CRM. That's wrong. Use the concepts from the CRM that are useful. Add your own concepts if you think it's absolutely necessary. There's no other way around. And there's no rush to it. We have to provide stability over the decades, because cultural information has a lifetime of hundreds of years, and not of the life cycle of the technology, the current technology. So using the CRM also starts with one property, two properties. Many people say the CRM is too complex to use. It has so many concepts. That is not the point. It has these concepts that you find the adequate concept. You use one concept and then you have used the CRM. So easy. Now, because we have to deal with extensions that describe more specialized knowledge, we have created a modular structure to have manageable units, and we maintain a core so that all extensions to the core model, the CRM proper, are specializations. In particular, that if we introduce new properties, that there are relationships, that they fall under more general relationships. And that has a surprising effect that even if we may add descriptions in a completely different description, more detailed, much more detailed, all the facts that are in that can be reached by querying the core concepts. So your data do not show any of the core model, but you can query it. The system knows how to reach these facts, and nothing is lost. Whereas if you use application profiles, any new field to the application profile is lost to query to the core. So that is a fundamental difference. So that has the effect that we used to be, in order to be interoperable, we are no more bound to a core vocabulary. We are only bound to a vocabulary which is a specialization, invisible to the application, but known to the system of the core. And what is the core is not a historical fact, not a question of group domination, so how some may guess, but it's a dynamic result of applying functional principles. And so you can follow our minutes that we revise the core and adjust, hopefully backwards compatible. Continuously with any new extension, some facts may appear that where we are able to better understand the core concepts and make them more clear, more generic over the time. So the CRM becomes an open invitation to extend it by sharing, respecting common concepts, and evolving together with the community new common concepts. So the CRM becomes an open family of models. Just to go quickly through the extensions that we are currently discussing, there is the FRBROO model, modeling the new library practice of IFLA, which has been led together with us by Patrick Leboeuf. It's a causal model of intellectual creation and derivation. It represents all this detailed knowledge of the library community, how to identify intellectual content, something that museums have no particular culture about it. And it represents connecting the thing and the word in that way by being integrated into the CRM. So integrates museum and library perspectives. There's an extension to FRBROO itself, which is PressOO, modeling journals and serials, which is also approved by CRM SIG and IFLA. Then we have a new model, CRM Inf, about inferencing. It's basically who's that something that is stated in a database. Yeah? So we try to make a step from data to knowledge by integrating data with a scholarly justification. And we validate this by use cases of scholarly annotations on manuscripts and such things. Then we have this CRM Science, a scientific observation model, which is currently under review by the special interest group. It generalizes over a set of eScience standards, Inspire, Oboe, Seek, Darwin Core, etc. It generalizes concepts of units of matter and their genesis, how things have come into being physically or by human activity. It introduces a concept of observation, data evaluation. It has been validated in archaeology, biodiversity, geology. And then we have a CRM Archeo, which is a specialization into practice, archaeological practice of excavating, which is a specializing CRM Science, also currently under review. Introduces the very important concepts of stratigraphy and excavation. And we have CRM Geo, which is a quite demanding model, spatio-temporal model that integrates the CIDOC CRM with the OGC standards and provides a complete model of phenomena occupying space-time, which is also consistent with modern physics. It integrates particularly geometry-derived topologies and semantic-derived topologies, so in the future we can do reasoning on constraint satisfaction of information from both sides. Now the first step was to introduce its core concepts, the new insight that has come from that, into the CRM itself, and then adapt CRM Geo to be a specialization of that. Finally, we have CRM Digital, which is very down to practice of digitization processes, scanning, etc. And it has been validated in various projects, and this is also to be reviewed. So this is an invitation to give us your extension, whatever you were of for review and approval, and let's work together to maintain this idea of having a not isolated small ontologies that is propagated currently by W3C, but really an intellectually coherent framework. As long as we are convinced that the concepts we are discussing are commensurable, there should be a way to formulate them in an ontology which is logically consistent. So this is the picture I want to close that. The idea is that if we use few concepts with high recall, we can find all facts, but with very few questions, hopefully the most relevant questions, not the questions that are the common denominator in the sense of core fields, but the questions that are that will cover most of the other questions and contain the answers. And the more we specialize down, the higher precision we have. But we are not sure if a fact that has been described in such detail here in another source is described in the same detail. But in order to make sure that we find everything, we have a higher model that is able to retrieve facts that have been formulated in a causal way and then find with other methods if it pertains to our problem or not. So that to close the recall precision gap by this. So thank you very much. Then I will give the floor to Patrick Leboeuf to present FRBROO so that you get a more detailed understanding of what such an extension looks like. Thank you.